There he is.
Talk about on the wire.
Wow. They're moving us around.
Holy-
I'm not used to this position. It's
Oh, hold on.
just too weird for words.
Hold on a second. Here
Hold on.
we
Oh,
go.
thank God. There.
There
That's
we
so
go.
much better.
There we go.
I know
Now-
you guys tried to cut me out, but I
We
jumped back
weren't
in.
cutting you out, but we were gonna. We didn't want to hear the folks in the
No,
stands
I
going,
wanted-
they're late again.
I had to finish dinner. I started dinner late, so
It's all good.
I was talking to Eric earlier, so Eric wasted my time.
That's why I said I knew you were alive. I knew
Wow.
He knew I was here.
It's going to be that episode tonight.
Yeah, it's always going to be that episode.
It's marital bickering 24/7.
It's already started. Yes, it started.
You don't know already, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. This way is my once a week.
Oh, we're live.
spouse.
Oh, hi guys. I didn't know we're
I spent a
live.
lot of. He's nice enough not to be stuffing his face during the show,
I'm live.
and I guess literally holding the show up as opposed to
As
the
Atlas.
other literal who almost held the show up. Well, the one and only Jim Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
That is your panel for tonight. There you go.
How
We're going to. We had some stuff last week. We had a great show last week, actually.
That was a hell of a show last week. Right?
one-
Two of our favorite people, right? Let's start by
Yes.
saying that. Like, first of all, two of our favorite people that frankly they could just stop by the show at any point and we would make space for them because they're just decent human beings. And Ken and James came on second. We'll talk about Ken first. It looks from everything I've heard that T-Fest was a huge success this weekend.
It's great.
Oh my God. Another successful small regional show.
It's crazy, man.
Oh,
What's happening?
Like we're just blessed with that. And I think the lesson that I would say to everybody is if you think you can't do it, you're full of shit. And you should get your own little show so that people can show up and meet each other and support each other and play games with each other.
Well, I will have info on that show later, but first of all, what I would like to do is talk about Gen Con because last week, because we had Tom and Ken, we weren't able to talk about Gen Con. And
well, let's finish by talking about Tom. Let's
go
recap
ahead.
real quick. So last week Tom was on the show too.
Some props.
And more than anything else, I think that's the first time I can remember where we had somebody whose crowdfunding campaign was literally ending on the show.
Yep.
And didn't quite hit the last goal that he sort of wanted to hit, but still an unbelievably respectable number. I am very enthusiastic about these sorts of things. I love that he took the time to be with us as it was coming down to an end. And again, a guy responsible for a regional show that just checks all the boxes.
Right.
And I think that, maybe a few weeks from now when we have a sort of opening where we can sort of spend the night talking about it, I think we should talk about the do's and don'ts of having a small regional show, like how to start, what to do, and so on and so forth. I think that would be good for everybody. But it was a great episode last week. We don't normally call back and say you ought to watch last week's episode, but you ought to watch last week's episode because that would be great. But you want to talk about Gen Con? Let's talk about Gen Con.
I have questions
to talk about Gen Con.
I want you to talk, and then I have questions later.
So I worked feverishly hard at the Gen Con auction. So if you've not been to Gen Con has had an auction since year one. Gen Con has always had that as a part of it. We as gamers tend to have a closet full of shit we don't need. And the auction's a great way of finding it a new home. And the Gen Con auction also has a consignment store. And so my Gen Con Wednesday is when we first start. Wednesday morning is setting up and getting ready to open the floodgates. We promised that we would be open by noon. And we actually opened about 11:30, 11:30, somewhere in there. And things went very smoothly this year. We doped out how we wanted the lines, and it worked pretty well. There was a little bit of a backlog in the express line simply because there were a lot of people with 25 items or less. But people bring things to put in the consignment store, and then people bring things to go for live auction. Live auction is a little more expensive to have things come across the podium. But in theory, knock on wood, what we're doing is we're trying to get the most money we can for the people who are selling those items. The consignment store works a little differently. There's three prices. You have your Thursday price, your Friday price, and your Saturday price. And And so people have very interesting pricing strategies. You know, there's the guys who are like, it's worth this much money and it will be the same price all 3 days. Okay, sure. But my pricing is it starts at a fair price, then it goes to the bargain price, and then it goes to the I'm not taking this shit home price. And I am very pleased to say that of the 26, 30 items that I put into the store, I literally only had 2 that came back with me. So I was pretty happy. The auction this year, one of the other things that we did is we actually raised the prices a little bit. I'm sorry, I should say we, but the Gen Con auction raised the prices a bit, where what we have seen before is a flood of items, and when we've had too many items, it's been a real struggle. But we had a reasonable amount of items. And the other thing we did is if you had an item sell at the auction, you got $1 back. If you didn't, you lost the $1. So we essentially like raised the price a little bit. And what this did, frankly, is it cut the bottom 10% of the bullshit out of the auction and the consignment store.
Nice.
And I say that because, you know, there's always the seller that went into Ollie's and bought whatever the board game was at Ollie's by the crate. And then they show up at full retail in the consignment store and there's 50 copies. And this is madness, right? We don't want that. You know, nobody wants that. Anybody who's associated with the auction doesn't want that. As far as the major categories, one of the things that we did this year is we actually launched a crowdfunding night. Crowdfunding items just tend to take over an auction and are everywhere. And what we decided to do is aggressively put all the crowdfunded items into Thursday night. Why Thursday night? Well, the auction actually opens up Thursday morning at 10 and we start rolling. It's usually family board games first thing. But by putting all the crowdfunding stuff, I hate to say this, but we actually came up with a joke during the show. It's heavy, so it must be good. Because the average crowdfunding project is roughly 50 or 60 pounds worth of game.
Oh, dear.
And they, I mean, about a decade ago, 10, 15 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, the big game that was released at Gen Con was Horus Heresy, the board game from Fantasy Flight. I saw 4 shrink-wrapped copies of Horus Heresy go through the auction, right? And that's just an indicator of the bigger problem, which is all these crowdfunded projects were massive boxes that had never been opened. And so I always talk about the board game apocalypse, like we're coming closer and closer to the board game apocalypse. Mm-hmm. And shortly behind it is the crowdfunding apocalypse, right? Because too many people threw too much money at too many projects they've never opened. And having this on Thursday night was a way to get this out the door. So we cleared up a ton of space by having crowdfunding night. We'd sort of pirate themed it just to sort of have a little fun with it. Then we did auction after dark, because every auction, every year at Gen Con, there's always the skeezy items that people are like, I bought this at a Spencer's when I was 13. I'm going to put this into the auction to get my money back. Okay, great. Thanks. I appreciate that 14-year-old you got the swingers party game out of the back of Spencer's. So we pulled 30 or 40 items. I put on a Hugh Hefner outfit. We did some stupid things, and we got rid of that sort of skeevy stuff. And we were done by 11 o'clock. Friday for me is a pretty crazy day as well. I literally auctioned from 2 o'clock until midnight on Friday. And so I took care of most of the miniatures, painted miniatures, Gaines Workshop. I took an hour break and I came back and we did collectibles. Now, collectibles was a little different this year. We do have a seller that seems to be sitting on a mountainous warehouse of shrink-wrapped modules. He always puts some in the consignment store, and then he puts the better stuff into the auction, and they wind up in collectibles. And the prices were pretty good. I won't say that there was shrink fever. Like, we didn't have anybody that was paying $100, $150 for stuff, but it sold. We did have, of the tournament modules from the 70s, the one that everybody always talks about is Sojcanth. You know, Tomoe-Con is harder to get. It's Tomoe-Con, Sojcanth, and what's the third one?
Ghost Tower.
Ghost Tower. Ghost Tower of Inverness and Tomoa Con are the more desirable because there are flavors of those modules. There's the DM's copy, there's the judge's copy, there's the player's copies, and because of that, some of them are in great condition, some of them are less. But the problem is Sojkamp. There were 300, and they're all like each other. There's no DM's copies, and so on and so forth. So we had a Sojkamp, and there was a reserve. Now, the seller, who I trust, I believe, I know the seller. The seller is the person who sold a wood grain last year at the auction, at the Gen Con auction. It's from one of the play testers, but there is no letter. He's going to have to get the owner's the original owner's sister to sort of sign an affidavit, which you can do, but they trade. When they sell routinely, they sell for about $5,000 because they're for lack of better words, they're the less expensive of those three tournaments.
And honestly, Jim, I think they're the uglier of all three.
Yeah, they are. They are. Like,
the maps look bad. The maps are yuck, and so
yes, and so we had a Sojkamp. It did not hit reserve. The reserve was over 6,000, and I said to the seller, I said that's a pretty aggressive price point, and that's the thing. At an auction, you have no control over what your sellers put as their reserves. We try not to talk about reserves a whole lot in the auction. I think that when you talk about reserves, it cools bidding a little bit. You are excited to say the reserve's off, it's going home. But at the same time, I make the mistake, and I try to correct myself and not talk about that. I spent not a lot of time in the exhibit hall this year. I did hear a lot of things, but I did not spend a lot of time in the exhibit hall. And so I did get to play. If you've been watching the show over the past year, you know that I'm one of those people that thinks Kingdom Death is amazing. And I have nothing but great things to say about Kingdom Death. I think it's one of the most play-tested games I've ever played. The way that they use decks of cards I'm going to say this, don't lynch me. The way they use decks of cards to dictate the monster's actions are the best use of card decks in an AI form that I've ever seen. So I played in 2 games of Kingdom Death, hour-and-a-half time slot, one on Friday morning, one on Saturday afternoon. And what's interesting is I played the new content that's just shipping. So Friday morning was Red Witches, where you've got a couple of monsters and you're trying to defeat them. And we did. Hooray! On Saturday, we got our clock cleaned. Of the 4 players, the healer died early, explosively. Literally, their head exploded, and then it was just a long, slow slide down a razor blade, and it was brutal. And I got a trophy. I got a pigeon as a consolation prize for being the last person in the group. Still. But I did hear a lot of interesting things at Gen Con. The biggest one is probably the Wizards of the Coast stuff. So I indirectly heard about this, which is that Wizards of the Coast, the most recent version of D&D, is not as successful as 5th edition. Color me shocked. But the person that was talking about this with me, there's been a bit of an apology tour. I think that's the only way to call it. And so there certainly seems to be a bit of a mea culpa that perhaps things didn't go quite the way they wanted. You can talk about the OGL fiasco. You can talk about Lorraine leaving. You can talk about whatever. But there seems to be a sea change. There's somebody at the rudder that's trying to make a sea change and make things better. There's other stuff that I heard about this that I can't talk about. But the most interesting part of that is Wizards was like, hey, how do we get you back in the fold? How do we get you back on board? It's been a few years, blah, 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 blah. And the person they were talking to was like, here's my ultimatum. You got to do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. And if you don't jump through those hoops, we're done. And I was very proud to hear that. I was very happy to hear that because This is somebody who was an ambassador of the hobby. This is somebody who really put themselves out there for Dungeons and Dragons and was public about their love of Dungeons and Dragons. And in return, and that's a mistake. That's a terrible mistake because he was a great person for the hobby. Crowded as always. Gen Con is absolutely batshit crazy. 75,000 people. The smartest thing they've done is move all this gaming to the stadium where they've got enough room. The bad thing is the stadium's starting to fill up, and you still have to hike it all the way to get over there. But the people who are in like the DCC tournament have plenty of room. There's Fight in the Skies. Fight in the Skies has always been at Gen Con since year one, and if you go, you're going to see Mike Carr crawling around on a table the same way he did 50 odd years ago. And that's pretty nice to see. There's been a lot of talk in the industry about Peter Atkinson retiring. Peter Atkinson is done. He's out. He's getting out of everything. He just wants to spend his time with his wife, traveling around and go doing things that he wants to do. I think that's a great idea. What has Peter done for the hobby lately? He's done a lot for the hobby, but he's sort of played with Chaldea or however you pronounce it. He's been very hands off from Gen Con for quite a while. He backed out of Gen Con and put Adrian Swart out in charge of Gen Con for the longest time. Gen Con has its own staff. He's not a part of the day-to-day. I think the biggest mistake I've ever seen is people coming up to Peter about something at Gen Con and being like, and he's like, no obligation.
Bathrooms are dirty, Peter. The bathrooms are dirty.
That's right. So interestingly, they have big con problems. They're now talking about banning the little carts that people were pulling behind them. The aisles are choking and absolutely crazy. I mercifully did not catch COVID or some other variant of flu death or flu-mungus while I was there. But I also was horking down airborne for 10 days before the show started and just trying to get my immune system up to speed. I like Gen Con. My first Gen Con was 93. It was in Milwaukee. I was at Gen Con when they tore the old TSR castle down, and there was the biggest Nerf gun fight I've ever seen in my life, because literally Lorraine Williams at TSR went to a Toys R Us and bought every single Nerf thing they had to arm the TSR employees.
Really?
Yes, it was great. It was glorious. I actually have a chunk of the castle. It's over in my cabinet. So I'm a big believer in Gen Con. I like the things that Gen Con offers. We got a lot of fly-by-night Chinese companies at this point that are trying to claw their way into the North American market. They just are. And a lot of them are the companies that were making or are making games for companies here. And, there are perils with that or whatever, but I wanted to show you, I bought very little at Gen Con, and I wanted to show you guys this. So let me show you this. This is a model for the King in Yellow. Okay. So those of you who are Call of Cthulhu people and Carcosa and so on and so forth, this model was for sale by Dimension Games, Dimension Games. And this is based on the Robert Chambers book that really in the early 90s, it's linked to Hastur. Everybody's all in on the King in Yellow. Gosh, it's in public domain, so I hope you like a lot of Cthulhu, because you're also going to get a lot of King of Yellow. That was $25. Now, I looked at the sprue before I bought it. I couldn't believe how nice it was. It's comparable to Kingdom Death. It's comparable to some of the other things. There's actually some features about the sprue itself that make me think that this is one of the parts manufacturers for Kingdom Death overseas. Could be wrong. I'm frequently wrong, but I really, really feel like, for $25, I thought, screw it. I'll see what it looks like. Gen Con's got everything, right? This is like that bad, what was the character, Stefan on Saturday Night Live? Gen Con, it's got everything. It's got midgets. It's got corsets. It's got dice. Dice, dice, dice. The hottest club at Gen Con is drink till you fall down, which, there are people literally drinking until they fall down. However, Gen Con does have a problem, right? Which is you wander the booths and you go game related, not game related, not game related, not game related, game related, game related. And Gen Con has flirted with and is trying to be it wants to be the next Comic Con. I don't resent that. But you can't be Gen Con and get too far away from your roots. There's a gigantic cosplay parade on Saturday that, Jesus, if you get stuck on the wrong side of it, you aren't getting past. You can't run through the crowd. They put up rope barriers. It's just miserable. But cosplay to me, like, I get that people have decided they want to be Elminster. I'm happy for you. But cosplay isn't why I go to Gen Con. Now, for a few years, the Battletech pods, the old sit-down Battletech pods from when FASA had virtual worlds, they show up at Gen Con. They went away for a while, but they're back. Last year, they came back. And some of the best memories I have with my son are sitting in the Battletech pods where he was going to get Dad, and then he discovered Dad might know a thing or two. And in fact, I still have the printout sheets where I headshotted him, then I headshotted him, then I headshotted him, then I headshotted him. I say to everybody, go to Gen Con at least once. Go at least once. See everything about Gen Con. Go to the auction. Go wander the exhibit hall. I have found stuff at Gen Con that I love. I'm a big fan of Timid Monsters. She's this wonderful woman in Colorado that makes these little clay monsters, and they're adorable. They're totes adorable. And she's been coming to Gen Con for 8 or 9 years. I have an embarrassing number of fezzes because some of the nicest people I ever met at Gen Con were the folks that had fezzes until the wife fell ill, and they haven't been back for a few years. I think you have to go to Gen Con at least once. But if you don't like crowds, just skip it because it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. It gets very, very thick. Now I've saved something. One of the other parts of Gen Con and the auction is that Gen Con actually has a charity auction. And so this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit. So anybody watching this show, if you didn't know this, I am an auctioneer. I'm an auctioneer at Gen Con. I'm an auctioneer at GaryCon. I'm an auctioneer at Gamehole Con. I'm an auctioneer at North Texas. I'm going to be going to Wizard Con. Here, I'll reveal it here first. So I'll be at Wizard Con in the spring. And when I'm an auctioneer, I really am trying to get the most I can for whoever's items I am selling. But when I'm in a charity auction, my job is to literally turn the audience upside down, shake them for money, and do my best for the charity. So let me talk about something about Gen Con's charity auction. The Gen Con charity auction is entirely dependent on how generous the exhibitors and vendors are in giving us things to auction. And I can't say enough good things about the Gen Con exhibitors and vendors. Got a great story. Our guy who went around to he went to the Wizards of the Coast booth and said, "Hi, I'm with the auction. Here's my badge. I'm really with the auction. Do you have anything that you'd like to donate?" And my God, the woman just was like, "Here, you can have this, and you can have this, and you can have this, and you can have this," and gave us a giant pile of stuff. So hats off to Wizards of the Coast, right? But Gen Con picks every year. They pick 2 charity partners, and they pick these charity partners through some method that I am not privy to. Their charity partners have 2 booths next to each other in a high traffic spot in the same place every year at Gen Con. And this year, I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I never saw one of the charity partners manning the booth. Like, I saw the other, but the other booth was essentially empty. And this was another year where nobody from Gen Con's charity partners was willing to come and talk to the audience at the charity auction before we began raising money for them. Now, I ran into this a couple of years ago where I went to the booth. I talked to both of them. I said the auction starts at 7 o'clock on Saturday night. If you could have somebody there at 6:50, that'd be great. And for my efforts, nobody came. And in fact, the person that I spoke to went to essentially a special interest group meeting mixer, social mixer, rather than come to our charity auction and talk about their charities. I I had a conversation this week with somebody at Gen Con who I essentially said, like, Gen Con needs to set expectations with its charity partners. And
Right.
one of them is that you have to man your booth. If we pick you as the charity partner, one of the two charity partners, you have to man your booth. You have
It's
to
like
be there.
the very least they could do. That's the very least.
And the other is that you have to go to the charity auction and explain your charity to the entire crowd at the charity auction. Because like Gary Kahn, like Gamehole, we have people that show up ready to drop money. A few years ago, I've told this story before, but my very first convention was a small local show at an agricultural hall in Eastern Kentucky. And I had a button from that show. And a few years ago, I told the story and I put the button into the charity auction. And two guys got into a knife fight in a phone booth and it sold for $4,000. Okay, right? And the guy still wears it and has it on his lanyard. This not coming to the charity auction to explain your charity to people is a bad move. It doesn't look good on the charity. And I said to the person from Gen Con this week, I said, I don't have any control over this. I can go to the booth, I can make a request, I can ask them to be there, but I have no teeth to enforce this. And truthfully, if Gen Con is going to select a charity partner that's going to receive, on average, half of $50,000, right? The auction raises about $26,000. And Card Halla, where they build monstrous towers out of common collectible card game cards, at the end of it on Saturday night, they blitz it with money and they shovel all this money together, and they usually raise about $20,000. But all in, Gen Con makes a serious charity donation to two different charities they pick. But my response now, last year I had one of the charities who came. They were wonderful. They spoke before the auction. They were very eloquent. They were thankful, and we raised a hell of a lot of money. But this year, I hate to say it, but more often than not, the charity partners don't show up after we've extended the invitation. And my suggestion to Gen Con this week was, I would really like it if you put some teeth in this. You have to be at your booth to explain your charity to complete strangers walking by who might be interested, and you have to show up at the charity auction and talk about it. And I don't see those as demands. I don't see those as reasonable requests.
It's a bare minimum.
It is. It's the bare minimum. And the fact of the matter is whoever at Gen Con that manages this process has not established minimum expectations. And if there are no minimum expectations, they just do whatever they want. And that's unfortunate, right? Because I do genuinely believe that I hate to lump us all into the category of gamers, but most of us in this wonderful hobby of ours tend to be generous and tend to be generous to a fault. And I've never seen a mean streak of overt stinginess the way I have in some things. I think most gamers are more than willing to bend over backwards. Come on, it starts with, you don't have a player's handbook? Here, you can borrow mine to get your character going.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a fan of that. I really, really am. I'm a big fan of that. Gen Con used to be the show that everybody had big new releases. Now, Corvus Belli premiered Warcrow, its miniature game, at Gen Con last year. They always have some releases for Gen Con. Paizo, they were talking about the next edition of Starfinder, but they did not. I don't believe they had it for sale. Their booth was a little thin, but the Starfinder people were at my hotel because they had a special event. I guess in Starfinder in game, in the setting, they've created a fictitious band that's named after an actual Japanese band called Strawberry Machine Cake or Strawberry Cake Machine or something. And so the bar at my hotel, if you ordered drinks or participated in the event, you got this special Paizo Strawberry Machine Cake pin. And the bartender on Friday night was like, "Yeah, I got a whole box of these. Do you want a handful?" I was like, "Sure, I'll take them." So I mean, for me, Gen Con was pretty much exactly what it normally is, right? It's a lot of feverish work. It's about seeing people that I see once a year. I felt bad because I was at the auction so much this year that I miss seeing some people that I have my 5-minute once a year catch up, and I'm very sad about that. But I also knew I was there to work, and we had a lot of work to do at the auction, and it went pretty well. Let me talk to one last thing. So if you have not noticed or you haven't heard about this, I'm going to just talk to this very briefly. So at the Gen Con auction on Sunday, we do payouts to sellers. And the problem is this year that one of the things that the Gen Con auction uses is Square terminals. And something got borked. Ooh. And Square did not pay out credit card transactions in the timeliest of manners. And so there were some bounced checks. Now, they're making them whole. They're trying to get this all sorted out. The auction, the folks who own and run the auction have made Gen Con aware of what happened. They've explained it. They've been transparent. But if you're watching this and you're like, hey, everybody is aware. You know, the Gen Con auction team, the folks that run the auction have been doing it for over a decade, almost 15 plus years. They took over from when Troll and Toad was taking care of the Gen Con auction, and then they backed out. These are honest, decent people, and we bend over backwards to try to treat our buyers and our sellers fairly and equally. I know that they have been dealing with this since they got back. I know they've been trying to be transparent about this. They've been transparent with Gen Con. They've been transparent with the sellers. If you're affected by that, I would just say that give it some time. I'm one of those people. Like I had 2 checks and but I know they're going to make good on it. They have to make good on it, but they want to make good on it. And I don't think it's going to be an issue going forward. I know there are spitballing solutions for next year, and I think all these pieces will be in play. And I think it's a one-time only process. It's a one-time problem, but Square really hooped them, and that's not the fault of the Gen Con auction staff. So that's sort of my Gen Con report. What do you got, Mike? What do you want to ask?
Well, so I have a few questions. Do you have a list, or do you remember what were the top 10 collectible item auctions, and what did they go for? Or just
I know that there's a video out there. I haven't taken the time to look at it because I abhor my own face and video. The last item was the Soj cans, and so it did not sell. And I think of the top 12 or 14 items that we had, and it's an interesting thing because we had a Disney animation sketch. Somebody had put it into Tova, the Toys Oddities video, and so on, and we rescued it and put it in the collector's auction. We had a Catan, the unbelievable, super nice wood chest version of Catan.
Ooh, yes.
We had some good stuff, but people always ask me, they're like, Jim, well, how much did that go for? And I'm like, I'm moving stuff so fast that I just don't remember the amounts. And I'm not trying to be vague. I'm not trying to avoid it. It's just one of those things where I don't remember. I just don't remember, because my job is to get through this, to get the maximum amount of money and get it done.
Did anything surprise you then? Let's say, so the Jean went for less than the price, but you warned the guy.
I did win. I won something. I won something I didn't expect to win, and I don't know if it was because they just decided to be sympathetic or whatever. but we had an insanely nice copy of the true first printing of the Greyhawk Folio. Hold on, let me get it and I'll show you.
which, by the way, are notorious for not being nice because of the size. They never fit in anything. Yeah, that's
So if
really
you look,
the edges on
yeah.
that. Yeah,
the corners are insanely nice.
yeah.
They're really just gorgeous. And the other part of this is that if you look here, you'll see that it's the hand stamped 1980
Right.
TSR games. They Bill Meinhardt, it pained Wilhelm to say this, but he said this is
No.
the nicest copy after my copy of
Okay.
Brian Bloom.
Okay, you got to always add that. Yes.
He always has to qualify it.
After his copy. It's
But he said that's the nicest one I've ever seen short of Brian Bloom's. And normally something like that should be $1,000 to $1,500. Truthfully, this one should have gone for more than $1,500, and I absolutely stole it. And it's because when I threw my bid in, all of a sudden the other bidders were just like, screw it, let him have that. I'm looking for other things. And I'll take the win, but I didn't engineer it, and I didn't, it's not like, So I was very happy about that. I actually, the one thing that I put in, I put some things in the auction, and one of the few things that didn't sell in the auction is like a third printing of the Greyhawk Folio. So I took one to sell, and I came home with two. So, if you're looking for one, I got a deal for you. I got a deal. Let me tell you.
Deal, I do.
But the other thing is, and I'll just touch on this.
We heard a lot about
that's
what was going to happen.
So the auction, we always do a creme de la creme, right? So we always have like whatever the Coppola dice set is. This is the last set of meteorite dice they're doing, and those went for $2,000-$3,000. The dice hoarders are always there and always ready to have a big fight over stuff. We never know what we're going to get. Now, we did have the original sketch for the cover of Gazetteer number 12, and it's very interesting. The story on that, we have a seller who last year put some original art in, and it was after the fact that we realized that one of them was a sketch for part of the cover of the box set, the Thetis and whatever box set. But this was the cover tier for Gazetteer number 12. This was the original pencil sketch.
Dark, is that Darkin?
No, it's Galantry or anyway. But it's got the Asian woman on the cover, and we found out the story because Diesel was there, and Diesel told us the story of how that came to be, which was the cover artist easily. There was a really, really smoking hot accountant that was at the TSR offices to do an audit, and he got smitten with her and said, "Oh, I have to get you to pose for me because I want to put you on the cover of a product."
Wow!
And I don't think he did any better than
Golden Con of Etherdar.
Yes, Golden Con of Etherdar. Yes. So that was in the auction. It did very well. We had a couple of very serious bidders, one from Hong Kong using a proxy.
Okay.
But
I can figure that out.
Yeah. So all in all, it was a great week. It was a great week at the auction. It was a great week at Gen Con. There wasn't, I'm pretty tuned in. I went to the Diana Jones Award on Wednesday night, and I was very pleased to see that some of the emerging designers included a fellow from Africa, from Uganda, and they're working on getting him to Gen Con next year. It just breaks my heart because his visa approval is going to take 10 months in Uganda. 10 months in Uganda. And this guy has created a little ecosystem of games. It's the same as the fellow from maybe it was Liberia a few years ago that won one of the emerging designer awards. I always go to the Diana Jones Awards. I've been going for 20 years, and the saddest part of the Diana Jones Award is when they read the list of everybody who's passed away the prior year from the game design field. And I was very happy to see that this was a year that there was a tie. Rose Estes tied with a game about environmental science and so on. And I thought it was a very nice recognition. Ties don't happen very often with the Diana Jones Awards. And if you're not familiar with the Diana Jones Awards, essentially this is game professionals who are picking what they believe to be the products that really demonstrate game excellence. And so you can take a look. It's named very tongue-in-cheek after the hideous TSR Indiana Jones game. And when they burned up a copy at a party, a fragment of a card was left that read Diana Jones, and that was the inspiration. James Wallace from Hogshead Publishing and a number of others are the folks who got it started. I support the Diana Jones Awards. I always write a check for $100 every year. It's not just a beer party. It's actually people who have a stake in designing games and making games and selling games, trying to recognize what they believe to be something special in the industry. And so you may disagree with their choices. I've disagreed with their choices. I was very vocal a year or two ago about Paizo's unionizing effort being recognized with the Diana Jones Award versus, and I
actual product versus actual product.
No, one of the things that was recommended was Adepticon. And Adepticon to me is the exact thing that you should recognize, which is a group of people come together to have folks to play games with. And that turned into, hey, why don't we try putting on a convention? And that turned into the world's largest miniature convention that has grown so much. It's moved twice in the Chicagoland area, and it's now in Milwaukee because it's so big. It fills Mecca. And that's pretty amazing, right? As a miniatures guy, I think you have to recognize those people. But other people felt differently, and that's fine, right? We're free of choices. What other questions you got, Mike? Hit me.
We heard a lot about Diamond Publishing keeping stock of certain publishers. Among those, the probably the biggest names were Green Ronin and Paizo.
Yes.
Did this impact their booths at the show?
So I was around somebody connected with one of the two companies that you mentioned, and there seemed to be a tacit agreement not to bring this shit up because they were at Gen Con and they were just trying to get through Gen Con. I know that all of the companies affected were scrambling to both have product at the show and make sure they had staffing and so on and so forth. There was no news about how things were going. There was no breaking news, like nobody said, "Oh, we've won," or
Well, I believe the next court hearing is the 21st.
Sure.
So yeah.
And so I think the unwritten rule, and I respect this, is when you've got a friend who's dealing with a lot of heavy shit, be the decent person and don't poke the bear, right? I was having a mellow drink with two of my good friends, and the last thing I wanted to do was be the turd in the punch bowl and say, "Hey, about that miserable experience you're going through with Diamond, how's that going?" Right?
Yeah.
Because,
how's it going? Yeah. Let's make this today happy. We're gonna make today happy.
I just don't. There's a time to be supportive. There's a time just to ignore the.
Well, I was just curious if they had enough product to actually sell.
I saw both booths, and I would say that they were, at least one of the booths was certainly a little thinner than normal. And I don't know if that's because of upcoming releases. I just don't. I don't want to speculate, but this still is playing out. This is still, and there's a lot of money at stake for these companies, and there are vultures circling to get a hold of that product and turn it around and make
Oh yeah.
Buy it cheap and flip it and get out.
Oh yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah.
What other questions you got?
They capped it. The attendance was capped at, I believe, 80 this year.
I don't know what the final cap.
I think it was 80. I think the official announce was 72. I saw it the other day.
Yeah.
But I mean, it could be anywhere in that $72,000 to $80,000 range. What I've seen over the years, it seems like it is moving towards being a entertainment con is what I call it.
Absolutely.
That's what I call Dragon Con. I think San Diego Comic Con has become an entertainment con, less about comics, more about entertainment. And I've heard that that's how Gen Con is moving. It's moving towards it.
Well, I think they would very much like to have that show. They would like to have the Middle America show One of the interesting things that I think, so Gen Con, the organization, the company is based in Seattle, and it reflects what I'll simply call Seattle values, right? Very, very much so. If you pick up the program, if you read their code of conduct, if you read anything, you'll see exactly the points that they want to get across, where they're coming from, and so on and so forth. I'm gonna try to tap dance through the political wire, but they are a Seattle's values show, where the show is in Indiana, in Middle America,
and flyover territory. Here we go.
Deep in the heart of flyover territory.
Yeah,
and so I think that Seattle's values are very entrenched in the show and the organization and how it's run. I think if you look at a lot of the focus in gaming over the last 25 years, I think it echoes the way that Gen Con has pushed and gone. And truthfully, it has nothing to do with what people actually do at the show. Nobody at the Dungeon Crawl Classics tournament is sitting around discussing Gen Con's statements on this or that, or who their charity partners are, or anything like that. But they definitely want the show to be bigger and bigger. And my God, the new hotel that the Hilton chain is building, it's an 800-room hotel.
Wow.
They're really trying to do their part. Indiana's trying to do their part. Indianapolis is trying to do their part to really keep Gen Con from going anywhere. It isn't going to go anywhere. It isn't going to go to Chicago. Anybody who thinks it might go to Chicago is delulu, because that's not going to happen. The show could go somewhere else. Where? Like I don't see Seattle-based Gen Con moving it to Texas. I sure as hell don't see them moving it to Cincinnati, or it just isn't going to go anywhere. And Indianapolis, I believe, sort of recognizes in the back of their mind that it's not going to move anywhere. But the show has added cosplay. It's added a lot of things that are steps towards being Comic-Con Middle America. And that's okay if you want to do that, but I'm not, I go to Gen Con to work the auction, and I go to play some games, and I go to see my friends, and I can do all of those things currently, and I should still be able to do those things a decade from now. But a decade from now, I have no idea what Gen Con's going to look like.
Sure.
I have no idea.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I would say this, right? I was talking about this on Sunday a little bit as we were waiting to check people out for checking out of the auction and in the consignment store and so on. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is that man, oh man, board games. The consignment store was absolutely overflowing with board games in the shrink. Played once. Same for the auction. I heard from a retailer. I had a very interesting conversation with one of the best game retailers in the United States, the owner of the store, on Friday night. And he and I were talking about this, and he said, I'm solicited. I want you to wrap your head around this. He's got one of the biggest, best stores in the world, and he's being solicited for anywhere from 150 to 200 new board games a week. These are unsustainable numbers. Now, don't get me wrong. For everything like, I don't know, Frostgrave, or not Frost? Is it Frostgrave? No, it's what's the big Kickstarter one? It was Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven, and then Frosthaven. Oh, yeah. Yes, but for every one of those where it was a home run and so on and so forth, you got the get rich quick guys that are just trying to knock something out fast and furious and put it out there. And it was made by the high school graphic arts dropout. High school. There's just too much stuff right now. Yeah. And we're going into fourth quarter, and he said himself, he was sending people out in the show to put eyes on merchandise because he doesn't want to make a mistake and order 20 or 30 copies of something that's just, it's going to get a 1.5 on Board Game Geek, and it's done. I think RPG space, the one thing I really did notice is the Shadow Dark latch-ons are here.
Oh, boy.
Everybody and their mom thinks that Shadow Dark is where it's at, and all of them are just, hey, we've got something for Shadow Dark. Hey, we've got something for Shadow Dark. Hey, and you're just like, okay, I get it, right? And I think Kelsey, Kelsey's been pretty good about letting people play in her sandbox, but at some point the market's going to be saturated the exact same way that D&D 3.0
Sure.
was with the OGL. The first few releases for the OGL, we had some really great quality content and some stuff that was amazing. But by year 2, I've got a mimeograph machine. I want to be a game designer.
Oh, yeah, that was the D20 system license.
Yes, exactly, right. And I think that's something we have to be careful of. But one of the things I made a joke. It's interesting because Facebook always throws these wretched memories at you from 10 years ago or 15 years ago and so on. And 15 years ago, I said, I wish I could go back in time and get the monopoly on corsets for Gen Con because I would have been a millionaire. Now, 15 years ago, there were 3 different stores at Gen Con with corsets. Now there's only one, but their booth is the size of 6 booth spaces, and they have try-on places. And again, I get that the cosplay thing is not my bag, baby, but what do corsets have to do with Gen Con? Or what do corsets have to do with gaming?
That's just not even a Gen Con question. We could talk about a whole show about how, and I mean, I can give you examples of going to shows and the ratio of actual game dealers, I call them tchotchke dealers,
right,
is pretty much 50%.
Would you like useless plastic objects? Because we've got a lot of useless plastic. Like there's the one booth selling the weird Japanese body pillows. Like, oh, lonely gamer, would you like to have this pillow that you could hump at night? No, I'm good. Thanks a lot.
I've already got my hump pillow. Yeah, I've got my pillow to hump.
And truthfully, like one of the things that I'm always pleased is Artist Alley. Every year I see a couple of artists where I'm like, I would not pay you for any of that. But they are outnumbered 9-1 by, holy crap, look at that. That's astounding. And a lot of them are digital artists, which I'm like, okay, you're selling prints and so on and so forth. But Diesel was there. And I had a very good chat with Diesel's wife. We talked about a whole bunch of things. And they're not necessarily sure that they're going to come back to Gen Con because it's expensive. He's been holding down the fort. He's trying to sort of back away from some things as well. I don't blame him for that at all. I love Diesel to death. I think his wife's hysterical. She's just one of the nicest people I've met. But he still sells sketches and prints and so on and so forth. And he's very much an old school guy. He could move towards the electronic space, I guess, but I just don't. I don't know.
By the way, this is his 45th year. I saw Diesel this weekend too. He was at T-Fest. 45th year as a volunteer at the art.
Yes,
that's amazing.
That's a hell of a run.
That's amazing. Run. Yes, and so he retired from being a volunteer this year, and he said he may go back next year just to actually just go to Gen Con and not have to do all the stuff connected with being a volunteer in the art. But that's an amazing run.
That's a hell of a run, right? And I just I know people who've been volunteering for Gen Con for 30 and 40 years, volunteering just to work the show. And every year they get a special pin, and you'll see these people with hats where there's like 30 pounds of metal on the hat just because they've got so many pounds. I like Gen Con. I do. I like Gen Con. I took my son to Gen Con until he sort of got to a point where he's at school and he wants to do other stuff. I get that. But I had a lot of fond memories. He used to buddy up with a friend of his, and they'd hit the exhibit hall and they'd play in demo games. I think I've told the story before. One of the worst gaming experiences I've ever heard of was he and his friend got into what was supposed to be a My Little Pony intro game, and it turned out to be an X-rated My Little Pony post-apocalyptic game.
Oh my!
And my friend and his friend's father, one of my best friends in the world, like as soon as it started to get into the X-rated content, the boys were like, "Oh, we're out of here because we're 9 and 8," and and they went and told my friend Steve, and Steve went and had a discussion with the folks running the open gaming area, and we're like, "Did you know this? Like, let me show you the description, and now go look at what he's running." And that brought the game to a screeching halt,
Oh dear.
and so on and so forth. But those experiences are few and far between. Goodman Games runs a huge tournament for DCC cultists. I'm sorry, aficionados, and they have this huge tournament that runs over the entire course of Gen Con, and then they deliver things out they hand out awards on Monday or Sunday, excuse me, Sunday, and they're not alone. There's any number of people. There's a miniature painting competition I didn't even get near this year, but Gen Con's got something for everybody, but it's also not the show. If you went back in the 80s, if you went to Parkside, if you went to Milwaukee, it's not that show anymore. It's just not that show. And it doesn't, I'm in my late 50s, and my first Gen Con was 93. And the difference between 93 and now is just night and day. And 30 years from now, who knows what Gen Con will look like? Who knows what Gen Con will be about? There will probably still be board games that people bought and didn't play, but for the most part, it's supposed to be rooted in gaming and our history. But I don't know.
Times are changing, right? I mean,
they are. So
I one more question, and then Eric wants to ask. So one more. After the last year of hijinks and wackiness from WotC, what was the word around town when you talk to people about, you sat down at the end of the day and you're having a drink and you're like, wow, that WotC, what was the word? What was everybody like? Yeah, well, I don't know. Or was
I think interestingly, the number one thing I heard, and I heard it from multiple retailers that I spoke to, was that the latest version of D&D 5 Next, or whatever the hell they're calling it has landed with a bit of a thud. And I think that they are looking at the numbers, and I won't say that there's panic, but there's certainly a recognition the need to retrench and do some things differently. You don't just turn. I mean, this is like trying to maneuver a super tanker into making a 90-degree turn. You can't do it quickly.
Yeah.
And so inertia is going to carry it to a certain point, but then things have to change. I would genuinely say this, like, if you watch this show, and you've certainly heard us talk about WotC previously, and you've heard us talk about this other stuff, you have to say something or ask questions of your local store, right? My local store has sold X number of copies of the new edition of D&D, but it's like 1 to 5 new edition versus what they were selling for 5th edition. And I think that's pretty much across the board. I play games. I play every Tuesday night with the guy who owns what was the world's largest game store, the Century Box. I play with Gord on Tuesday nights, every Tuesday night. And Gord and I have traded notes about the new edition. Gord's numbers on Player's Handbook are frightening. Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, Monster Manual, 5th edition. Gord's numbers are thousands. He has sold thousands of copies of these books. And I don't mean like 1,000 or 2,000. We're talking multiples that are much higher. And that's in a city of 1 million. And that's a store that's been around for almost 40 years. That's a store that is very much a big part of Western Canada. It's a destination store and so on. And they haven't sold anywhere similar numbers of the new edition of D&D. Right. That also tells you how soft the market is.
Well, I'm hearing the same thing. Yeah, I heard the same thing.
But when I hear on Wednesday night that there are people from Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro that are trying to talk to people and trying to garner attention and trying to build bridges back or rebuild bridges or repair relationships and so on and so forth. Okay, that tells me that whatever we're sort of perceiving, there's a reality that's a bit harsher, and it's harsh enough to get people out from Everett, Washington, and get them to go visit people at Indianapolis. Now, I've said before that I think what you have to do is you actually have to go put boots on the ground. I think if my dog is playing with a toy, I'm apologizing now. But I think you have to hold on one moment, 1 second.
Oh my!
My dog with the editorial comments. So
I agree with your dog, by the way. Absolutely.
I love my dog. So I would say that what you have to do is you have to go out and you actually have to talk to stores and so on and so forth.
But go back to your ship analogy, because I like that analogy. You got this big giant ship, but they just fired the crew, and they fired the guy driving the ship, and they fired most of the people on the ship. So now they're going to.
I don't think they. I mean, Mike, I think they took the 20% that the theater kids knew, right? Like they fired the 20%.
That's fair. That's fair.
But you still got all these other folks, right? And come on, you don't just hire. You can't change the art style overnight. You have to say, we're going in a different direction, and we're going to do something different, and we're going to start at this point. But you've already got products that are in the pipeline. Like we've talked about the new box set that's coming out in September, and great, hooray! But
Jim, it's 2 years too late. The Borderlands box set. Remember when we talked about this initially 2 years ago? We were like, great idea. Go back. And I'm usually one that I don't think that WotC needs to keep like dog going back to its own vomit and eat it. They need to do something new. But in this case, I was like, you know what? You're going to launch a new edition. Let's do something that people are happy with. They love. It's part of the game history. I was like, okay, this is a great idea. And here we are. It's going to be fall of 2025, and it's going to come out.
You reminded me that one of the things that we sold in the creme de la creme part of the collectible auction was one of the shrink wrapped WotC anniversary boxes, the maroon box with all the booklets. And it sold for an outrageous amount of money that I can't recall, but it sold for an outrageous amount of money. And truthfully, if it was me, I mean, come on, Greyhawk has been on the schedule for a while, right? Give me Greyhawk. Mm-hmm. Give me a great version like that of Greyhawk. You did it once before. You could do it again.
They know how to do it. I mean, they've done it.
Give me books, give me whatever.
It just goes back to the last couple of years. I don't think they have a finger on the pulse of what people would like to spend money. I mean, look, the home run of the last few years was Baldur's Gate 3. Can we agree on that?
Oh, absolutely. But it wasn't a product that
wasn't them. I know it wasn't even them. That's the whole thing, is that they lucked into that in a way because they had another company developing it. And if you read the story about it was being developed, I mean, it was all over the place for a while. It started developing so far back that WotC had kind of forgot it was even there until somebody said, by the way, Baldur's Gate 3 is about ready. Oh, it is? Oh, all right, whatever. So I mean, they were not betting on Baldur's Gate being the home run it was. I really think that they were hoping the movie would be that home run, and it wasn't. Instead, it was the Baldur's Gate 3. And so I mean, coincidentally, this week they announced, we're obviously going to have a Baldur's Gate 4. Duh, of course you are. That is the one thing you've done right over the past 3 or 4 years.
But it's not going to be done with Larian, because Larian already said that.
Yeah, I know.
And listen, the reason why we're not getting any traction on D&D 2025 isn't like every other edition. They told you it's completely compatible to the prior edition. However, you can't mix books. So you can't mix core books from 2024 and 2014, but it's completely compatible.
Huh?
I'm sorry, you can't tell me what to do with my own damn books.
Yeah.
That's the marketing thing. Was usually it's a new edition. They couldn't even commit. It's kind of like it is, but it isn't. We don't know.
They're afraid to make a decision, and that's been the problem the last couple of years. I think they've been kind of wandering around the wilderness, like, well, are we going to do this? Are we going to be this kind of a business? Are we going to be this kind of a game? Or, do we need to do this? And look, we've talked about this ad nauseum the last few years about how there just doesn't seem to be any direction, any kind of compass pointing any which direction way, and they kind of just throw darts to the wall, and every once in a while one hits and they thumbs up, and then the most of them miss and they hit the rear end of the guy at the copy machine, and one goes over here and hits the water cooler. I mean, and that just seems to be their modus operandi the last few years. But I saw that announcement about Beyond the Borderlands coming out. I'm like, okay, yeah, this should have been out 50th anniversary.
It should have been out last year with the player's handbook.
I just, come on. We're coming up on some very interesting anniversaries for old TSR product, right? We're sort of past the Dark Sun launch. We're right into the sweet spot of Planescape. I think it was 95 when Planescape was released. We're at 30 years from Planescape. There's a lot to sort of think about. I had a lovely conversation on Wednesday night with Rick Mines from Chaosium, and we were talking about all this sort of stuff and other stuff. But I just, I'm at a point where I only buy the stuff that I love, and I'm not buying on speculation. I'm not buying because I think it's valuable. I mean, I showed this off earlier, but even if I don't put my King in Yellow together, I might give it to somebody like Alyssa Fadden, or somebody who is a miniature Call of Cthulhu person who would absolutely be tickled to death to have. Mm-hmm. And at $25, it's $25. I have very few wants, right? Like, I've wanted a first printing of the World of Greyhawk forever, and I did okay with that. I scored a second copy of Warriors for Mars on the cheap, and it's not as nice as the other one that I have, but now I have two, and I'm very happy to have that. I think I'm going to give that. I got the one so cheaply at the Gen Con Collectibles auction. I might give it to my friend who does not have one, who's always wanted one.
Nice.
You know what? Sure. Like let's share the love.
No, Jim. We should hoard our stuff. Like, oh wait, never mind. We're getting too old.
Yeah, I'm not. I sold a bunch of stuff through the auction and the consignment store this year because I'm thinking of my family. We've talked about this before. I don't want my son to have to go through all this shit and be like, what is this crap? Right. I don't need 4 copies of Greyhawk, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th printing. I just don't. Right. And I got to have one of every printing.
I must have every print. Yes.
No, I'm not that guy. I'm just not that guy. But let me segue. We're into the second hour. So I'm going to segue to a conversation. I'm going to segue to 2 conversations I've had in the last week or so. And I had a very interesting conversation with somebody today who their spouse is like, you should get a hobby. You should pick something and you should do this. And I'm not saying that this person was Gary Oliver, but this person was Gary Oliver. And so we had a really great chat about it, because one of the things I had offered to do is I'd offered to sort of walk him through, he's interested in Stellaris. It's a 4X computer game. I really only recommend it for people that are single and don't have loved ones, because it's the kind of game that will just pull you in for 5 or 6 hours. And I offered to show Stellaris to Gary and sort of show him what it's about, because I had a Stellaris monkey on my back so bad that I've now played one night a week for 4 hours, and then I go cold turkey for a week. And we were talking about this and talking about hobbies and so on. And I said to Gary, Gary's a guy who's satisfied. If he wants something, he buys it, but he doesn't then say, well, this is my first soldering iron, and now I'm going to get a Japanese soldering iron, and I'm going to get one that's better, that's made in, like, he's got a soldering iron and he's happy. And if Gary played golf, Gary would have a bag of clubs and would never buy another club, right? Gary was like, I've got a set of clubs. Yeah. And my point to Gary today was, Gary doesn't suffer from the magpie disease. He doesn't suffer from, I have to collect this. He doesn't have that obsessive collector gene that a lot of us do have, right? Look behind me. Yea, verily, weep upon the library behind me. Weep behind the library. Look at the library behind Eric and Mike and so on.
No, I don't collect anything.
And in some ways, I said to Gary today, I'm envious of you, right? I'm envious that you don't have that like genetic defunct problem that makes us, I've got to have every printing. No, I don't have to have every printing. But it took me a while to sort of get over the hump and so on. And Mike and I have joked for years, my dad always said there's only two phases in life, accumulation and dispersal. And that's it. But I thought that was a very interesting conversation, particularly when you come back from Gen Con and you see all this stuff at the collectibles auction, you see all this stuff at the, like I sold it. We had 3 hours of Games Workshop this year, and there was stuff in shrink, there was rarities, there was all sorts of amazing stuff. But before I went to Gen Con, one of the things that I found in a box that I decided to sell is I have a very rare BattleTech miniature in the blister, and I've had that since 1991. And I looked at it and I thought, nope, you know what? I'm going to take this and sell it and let it have a better home with somebody else and somebody who will appreciate it. And I have not regretted that at all. I haven't missed that miniature in any way, shape, or form. And I think I've crossed the Rubicon, right? Like it's now time to start watching some of this stuff go and be happy to see it go to better homes with people who will be excited to have it in their collections. But I don't need to collect that stuff anymore. The other conversation I had that really sort of struck a note after, Stellaris is awesome, but I have a problem, right? Like, who remembers XCOM? Do you remember XCOM? I remember XCOM, and I remember how bad I was with XCOM, where I finally had to say only one mission a night.
No, boy.
Because I would play that mission to perfect completion, but I would be hours, right? And it was before, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so I played a lot of XCOM. And you got to know your limits, right? You got to know your limits, But I talked to another friend of mine last week about Gen Con, and we were sort of trading notes on it all. He's not a diehard convention person. He started off going to Mass Confusion and going to stuff like, he's been to Gen Con, he's been to modern Gen Con, and he said it pretty well. He said, I'm not afraid of missing out on anything. I don't have that FOMO. I don't have that fear of missing out on things because Gen Con is no longer that we're going to debut it here, or there's a limited edition you can there still is some of that, but for the most part, the companies have moved away from making Gen Con a gigantic release party for new products. They will usually have something. They might have a few copies for sale, but they certainly don't. Fantasy Flight. Oh, Fantasy Flight brought 7 pallets of Horus Heresy. Let me tell you, and they sold every copy of Horus Heresy. And I'm watching them all come back to the Gen Con auction still in the shrink wrap. Because, and you're right. Gary Oliver talking about XCOM 2. Yes, XCOM 2 was the better version, but it was the underwater version, which was kind of weird. So, I don't know. Other questions about Gen Con, other thoughts about Gen Con?
Well, I'll just say you're right about, that's very true about, there's a certain part of collecting, and I think I had the most FOMO probably early 90s when I first got on the internet, and I realized a lot of this stuff that I saw in Heroic Worlds I could get now. Before I never saw it, and I had serious, I've got to have this. I've got to have all the companions. I got to have all the Midkemia. I got to have all the RuneQuest, and so there was a whole decade when I had to have it all, and now I notice the FOMO doesn't hit me anymore. I don't feel like I'm missing out if I don't get the latest Kickstarter or something. I'm like, whatever. I've got a whole shelf of stuff here that I don't look at. So why am I worried about something else coming out that I'm not going to ever look at? So you get it to a point where you get beyond that. You start realizing that, I don't really need that.
I got my little consolation prize for being wiped out on Saturday in the Kingdom Death game and being the last guy standing. And it's a rare miniature, like it's a hard to come by miniature. Okay. But interestingly, I'm always trying to find better painters. I'm always trying to find people I can learn something from. I'm always trying to find miniature people who will push me to be a better hobbyist. And there's a guy on X who's also on the one of the Kingdom Death Facebook groups and is also on the Kingdom Death Discord server. And he goes by the name Zero. He is one of the most talented painters I've ever seen. He lives in Japan. He's meticulous. His models are staggering. And I decided that what I was going to do is I'm going to mail this little consolation prize, this insanely rare miniature. I'm just going to mail it to him because he doesn't come to Gen Con. He doesn't leave Japan. I have no idea who this dude is. I don't know how old he is. I don't know what his circumstances are, but he doesn't come to Gen Con. Okay. But you know what? He is an inspirational painter within the community. And he's somebody, he writes everything in Japanese, and I call it Twitter still, but X translates it into English for me, and I post comments on his pictures that are translated into Japanese for him. So we have traded notes back and forth about his stuff. I've praised his work because I think he's an amazing painter. But I got the model because I just by a stroke of fate I was the last person standing. That's not an achievement. That's the participation trophy. And not all 4 people got one. I was the person who got it. And so I don't feel like I did anything to earn it. I don't feel like I did anything that makes me special or more special than the other 2 people at the table who didn't get anything. So I said the other day I'm going to reach out to him, and I did, and we traded notes. I've got his address, and I'm going to go by the post office on Friday, and I'm going to put together a little care package from stuff from Gen Con, and I'm going to send it to him because that's what you ought to do. You ought to lift up these people in their hobby that are great. We all the time talk about we talk about how theater kids ruin D&D. I don't think they really ruin D&D, but it's a fun thing to say because it YouTube and videos and so on and so forth from the theater kids have changed D&D, but it's also brought in a gigantic audience who don't have the same thespian skills that these people do. But there are plenty of people out there with a blog who aren't chasing money. They're not chasing clicks. They're not putting up bait to try to just get those, like and subscribe. They're just people who want to share their love of the hobby. And I think we have to recognize those people. I think we have to talk about those people. I think, Ken James is an amazing artist, but Ken James decided that, hey, we ought to have a little convention in this area. Why don't we do this? I applaud that. I think you have to support that. You have to make an effort to support that. I didn't go to T-Fest, but I want one of the shirts because I think the design is cool and it's got a tentacle over it's got a Texas themed tentacle. You had me at Texas.
I did go to T-Fest. Carrie and I went, and I will talk about that a little bit because we love to promote small cons, and that's kind of the thing we do. And last week we had Tom talking about SharCon, and then Kenan came on and talked about T-Fest. And I am an unabashed fan of small cons, as anybody who has watched.
Who has a pulse and watches this show? Yes.
Yeah, I love. My sweet spot at this point is the 300 to 1,000 show because I feel like you can get some excellent gameplay in there. You get some good vendors. You see some people you get a few special guests. And I love it. I'm having a great time. And this weekend mixed in some barbecue. Oh, my gosh. Went to one of the 50 best barbecue places in Texas, Styles Barbecue. Absolutely amazing. It was one of the best barbecue places I've ever been to. But
And how was the food truck situation? I thought it was very impressive. They came out swinging with food trucks.
It was okay, but I think they had some issues because first day there was a hamburger truck, a taco truck, and a smoothie. Ice truck. What do you call it? The shaved ice truck. Hamburger truck ran out of hamburgers.
Problem.
Before Gary and I even got there, they ran out of hamburgers. Not a good sign. The taco truck was exceptional. They had for $20 you get 4 tacos, street tacos, and they weren't small street tacos. They had about 5 or 6 different varieties. The next day they had breakfast tacos. And so the taco truck was thumbs up, but there was not a variety of taco trucks. And this is one of the issues with having food trucks is they're kind of flaky. they'll flake on you. And Gary and I have had the taco truck, or we've had the food truck flake out. It has happened to us before. And I think they may have had that. I haven't talked to Kenan since then, but that might have been the problem. But you weren't in the wilderness here. There was a lot of places to eat within driving distance. We went to the Styles Barbecue Saturday night. It was absolutely incredible. So we got there. It was at a Marriott. It was a pretty new Marriott, very big. It was sharing the space with an Indian wedding.
Nice.
So it was an interesting juxtaposition. The vendor hall was separated into two different places. It was a lot of room to move around in, a lot of room to game in. Next year, Kenan said they're going to have the entire hotel, so they're getting all the rooms that the Indian wedding was in too. They're going to need it because this place was packed. For a first-year con, they had over 300 people. They did really well. Everybody was gaming. Everybody was having a great time. They had a great mixture of special guests you've heard of, some maybe you haven't heard of. The vendors, for once, there was some tchotchke vendors, but there was a lot of RPG vendors. And here's the thing that I can tell you why this is a successful RPG show. We were sitting there, and across from us was Greg Gillespie. Greg sold a literal F-ton of books. And he has those giant Mega Dungeon books. People would walk up to his place and walk away with 4 of these.
That's great.
At $50 a pop. He was making money hand over fist. So people were there to buy RPGs. Gary and I sold stuff, and we just bring, a selection of North Texas modules, and I bring some decks and many things, some shirts. We sold a ton of stuff. I mean, people were there, and that's always a sign of a good time. They weren't looky-loos. They were spending money, and they were buying gaming stuff. Jeff D was there with Manda. They sold a ton of stuff. I talked to him. He did great. Ben Burns was there. All the vendors I talked to that sold RPGs did really well. That is excellent because I go to a lot of cons where there's either not RPG vendors or the RPG vendors don't do that great. They'll sell a couple things. They have a lot of looky-loos. These were not looky-loos. These were gamers, and they were buyers. And that is exactly what you want out of a small con like that. They did a great job. I didn't notice any issues. If they were, they smoothed them over so much I never even noticed them. They had a raffle. They did, which Gary won a copy of Witch Mountain, which I don't even. The irony involved here, I don't even begin. Yeah. Oh, the hamburger truck I just left. See, and Kenan, we are with you, brother, because we've had the same issue with food trucks at North Texas. Food truck guys got Eric and Jim, they're flaky. They won't show up sometimes. Sometimes they show up and run out of food. We had that happen this year at North Texas. Sometimes, they're flakes. And so if you get a good one like the taco truck guy, just count that as a thumbs up.
Would you like Jim Kitchen's rule of food trucks?
Yes, sir.
So now normally the food trucks at Gen Con are in an area which has been taken over by construction for the new Hilton Hotel. But years ago, I figured out something about food trucks. Now, I understand brand loyalty. I understand the Ford, Dodge, Chevy. I get all of that. I am not wading into the DeWalt, Milwaukee. I'm not getting involved in that discussion. Mm-hmm. But I have observed one thing that makes me sort of gravitate towards certain food trucks. Everybody knows that food trucks always have the gas-powered generator that's running somewhere to make sure that they've got electricity and so on and so forth. I have found that the better end of the food trucks, the folks that are competent, that know what they're doing, that everything's going to work out, 9 times out of 10, they have a Honda generator. And they have a Honda generator that's a lot like your grandparents' refrigerator, which, when your grandparents die and somebody takes the refrigerator and puts it in the garage, they put it in the garage because it's going to run for another 40 years the way it has previously. And when your new refrigerator dies next year, you'll be able to put all of your food in the 40-year-old one. And the Honda generator rule of food trucks, if I see them and they have something shiny and new that came from Harbor Freight, or they have something like you're too new in the food truck business, or you're not paying attention to understand.
You haven't suffered
You have
enough
not
yet.
suffered
Yes.
enough. But
Well, I want to say, Kenan, the taco truck, 2 thumbs up. They did great. Invite them back next year. So you look, if you can hit 50% on your food trucks, Gary and I will tell you this: if you hit 50%, you're doing okay, because you're going to get 50% of the guys they're going to flake on you. And the taco truck guy, if we could get him to Dallas, we would, because he was incredible. But no, they put on a great show. They had an incredible supporting cast there. I mean, I had a blast. I didn't play any games, but I was busy. The hotel setup was excellent. They had the rooms here, and if you walk through an opening, there's a gigantic food court, guys. They had a food court in this. Now, there was only one place to order food in the bar, but they probably had about 20 tables there. And at one point, I walked out there, and every table had a game on it. Had people eating and gaming on every table in there. It was amazing. I would love to have that in North Texas. Unfortunately, we have the concierge room where you can't get in. But I would love that to be repurposed to eating area / gaming. So I think that Marriott is going to be good for a few more years until they get too big, because they are going to get too big, because they're putting on a really good show, and that show is going to grow because they have a very loyal. I mean, everybody there, you can tell they knew each other. They gamed together. The people that were new there were having a great time. I didn't hear any negatives. I didn't hear anybody bitching about any. Well, no, I take it back. People bitched about one thing. It was so freaking cold in one of those rooms, Kenan. It was.
I had no idea that Bill Meinhardt was in Texas last weekend.
Oh, nobody will ever complain about how cold it is in North Texas again after that one room to the north, I think it was, which was so cold that I couldn't go out there without a parka on. I walked in, I said, "Nope, don't want to freeze to death," and I walked right back out. It was so
but
cold.
I want to change. I mean, we've said a lot of great things about T-Fest, but I want to talk to something that we didn't talk about when we should have, and I just want to throw this out here. Number one, we didn't really dig a whole lot into EggCon after EggCon, and we had Heidi and Eric on to talk about EggCon before, and I just want to sort of close the loop out. Number one is they picked Gary's birthday as the sort of root of when EggCon is. Now, unfortunately for EggCon, it's in Lake Geneva. It's in Lake Geneva in the height of the tourist season, which means that that EggCon, unfortunately, the hotel rooms are Gen Con priced.
They're very expensive, $300 a night.
But
yes,
I have heard nothing but positives from everybody who was at EggCon.
Had a great time.
I've heard that the swag was absolutely top tier, and that Eric and Heidi have done an amazing job of pulling this little con together. And it's certainly serving a niche, and it serves its customer base. And I think we just have to. I mean, we're saying all these nice things about T-Fest. I just want to make sure that we say that as well about EggCon, because
the issues with EggCon, they're just part of being in Lake Geneva in the summer, and I don't. You can't change that. That's because where they're at the time of year. There's really nothing you can do about that. It's not like you say, well, to improve EggCon, you need to do this, and this. You really can't, because that's just part of being in a resort town in the summer.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be hard to park there. It's gonna be expensive. The hotels are gonna be expensive. It's gonna be kind of crowded on the streets. I mean, there's just things there that are issues. But besides that, they did a great job too. And I have been absolutely spoiled this summer with EggCon, and then now T-Fest. I've had 2 great experiences within a month with these small, 300 attended cons, and both were put on excellent. Like I said, Kenan and his boys deserve so much praise for what they did, because I rarely go to a con. It's a first year con, and sit there and go, okay, yeah, I would change this. I couldn't think of a lot. I'll be honest with you. I couldn't think of a lot to do to improve the con. That's how well.
And I didn't make it to T-Fest. I didn't make it to EggCon, but I have heard enough nice things from everybody that I just didn't want I didn't want us to not talk about EggCon.
No, EggCon was like I said, there were some issues, but I'm actually going to write Heidi and Eric a mission or statement or a after con statement. They want me to write a little something, but like I said, most of the issues I had with it, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, where they had the con, the Cove and the Harbor, the rooms are $300 a night. Now we stayed at the Comfort Inn down the street. It was very reasonable, but it was about a 4-block walk, which is not terrible. It's not awful, but the park there was a little difficult, but it's part of being in Lake Geneva in the summer. And once you realize that, I mean, there's no point bitching about it. That's just what you got. It's an absolutely gorgeous city in the summer. I mean, we're right there. The lake is right there across from the Cove and the harbor. It's amazing. It's a beautiful view. The downtown, we walk downtown every night to have dinner. It was amazing. They did a great job too. Ken and them did a great job. I mean, I am very, very confident in the OSR and the small con after this summer. I've just been so happy with the 2 cons I went to. I wish I could go to ShowerCon in a month. I think that's what I'm doing for the last half of my life here. I'm going to start hitting these small
you could
cons
certainly
and
do a lot worse
time.
than to go around to great shows run by great people, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And not only that, because it matters to these people. These are, Heidi and Eric, you could tell that con mattered to them. And then Kenyon and them, look, that con matters to them. That's something, and he was on last week and he talked to us. This is not something that just popped up. They've been doing this for a few years. They just decided to kind of go official at this point. And it was seamless. There was no people running around with chickens like their heads cut off and, oh my God, what happened here? And they lost this or whatever. Now, maybe I don't know all the whole story, but I know that I got everything that we're supposed to get. The table was great. They even supplied table covers, which Gary and I don't even supply because we're lousy human beings. Gary. We don't supply
Pro tip, table covers.
Yes, table covers are great. A couple little things. Dennis Sester was there on Saturday. I talked to him. He will definitely be at North Texas next year, God willing, because we don't, the man will be 86 years old. But we are planning to do a major 50th anniversary of Bunnies and Burros in North Texas next year. And Dennis is all in, and Dr. Scott Robinson, they're both all in. I look
forward to my red.
And we're going to do it up. We're going to have auction items. We have a first printing Bunnies and Burros signed by both gentlemen. We have some really, really cool stuff that Scott had in his kick-ass Bunnies and Burros drawer that he pulled out and donated to the con. We're going to have a birthday cake. We're going to do it up. We talked to both of them. They were excited about it. We're excited about it. So I talked to Dennis. Dennis is going to do everything in his power to make it there as long as, his health, as long as he's healthy, he will be there. So that was great. It was great. Dennis is an awesome guy. He is great. He's just such an asset to this hobby. And he's such a historical figure in this hobby that gets overlooked. I mean, he created the Druid, created Bunnies and Burros, Sword Bearer is an incredible game, way ahead of its time. If you look at the mechanic, he's just done so many things for the hobby that you forget he was there at such a pivotal time. Then he left the hobby to go on to be a kick-ass legend in the video game industry. So the guy, and of course he's a rocket scientist too. Throw that in there too. The guy's he's just an amazing guy. So it was great to talk to him. Just seeing Greg did so well at the con. So many people there were there to get their books signed. But there is a real interest in his Dragon Slayer game. He sold a lot of copies of Dragon Slayer and any and all of the Mega Dungeons. Sold like crazy. Now, Kenan did the cover, so that helped people. He could sign, and of course, Greg signed the book. But yeah, I couldn't believe how many people were walking up to his booth and walking away with $100, $200 worth of product.
If you make a great product, the money flows, right? And
absolutely.
And don't forget, it's the cover that sells the first book. It's the content that sells the second book. And Greg has understood this all along.
It's such a great concept. Yeah, it's AD&D and BX mixed together.
Pretty much.
Hello. What else do you need to tell people? And then there's like, I'll take it, and then people are just grabbing it and.
So I want to segue because I don't want to forget to mention this. I had a very pleasant surprise the morning I was getting ready to drive over to Indianapolis to go to Gen Con. And so I've talked about this before. I don't think I talked about this last week. anybody who knows me knows that I'm a gigantic fan of The Adventures of the Mad Scientist Club, the books by Bertrand Brinley. And there was, these were originally, there were 2 short story collections, because the short stories have been in Boy's Life and some others. So there's The Adventures of the Mad Scientist Club, The New Adventures of the Mad Scientist Club. Then there was a novel.
The unpublished
Well, it was
novel
published
that
in
was
such a small print run from a publisher that was having problems.
I had a copy, Jim. I had a
The
copy.
Big Kerplop, which was how the Mad Scientists came together. These are some of my favorite books of all time. If you have a 9 or 10-year-old that you want to throw them something to read, The Adventures of the Mad Scientist Club is great. So a few months ago, I was driving down to check on my stepmother and see how she was doing. And I discovered that the first Mad Scientist Club book is on Audible. Oh my God. And so bought it. The narration is great. It's really, really good. But before I left for Gen Con, I was in the car that morning, and as I was just about to pull out of the driveway, I looked, and the New Adventures of the Mad Scientist Club is on Audible as well. And really and truly, if you love the series as a kid, if you're not familiar with the series, it holds up real well. It's a lot of fun to listen to. It brought back all sorts of memories.
There is a collection out there that I think has everything.
There's a
now,
book
right?
collection. I think a Kindle version has all 4, the 2 collections of short stories and the 2 novels. And then there's the I think that's the Kindle version. There's also a paperback that I think collects it all, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then the Audible is just, if you're doing stuff and you're, like if I'm doing yard work or whatever, I usually will tune out with Audible and so on and so forth. But this just brought back a flood of memories. And
it's Americana. It's a simpler time. You read them and you're transported back to the 50s, 60s, and it's just, they're great stories. I'm like Jim. I read them growing up. I wore out I still have a copy that has a cover falling off. I've been meaning to buy the collection, the nice collection. I was lucky enough to get the Big Kerplop at a library sale.
No way. That's where I got mine.
The library
was a library sale.
A library must have had it in there for God knows how many decades. And I lucked out going to a library sale in a small town, saw it there, and couldn't believe my eyes, and got it for like $1.
Wow.
And it has the dumb library, the plastic library cover. But I was so happy to have found it.
Among the weird things that I delved into after I listened to this last week. So if you didn't know it, one of the Mad Scientist Club short stories, The Secret of Strawberry Lake, got optioned by Disney and made into a made-for-TV movie with Burgess Meredith and the mother-in-law from Bewitched. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. Agnes Moorehead. And if you do a search for whatever the name of it is, you'll find it on YouTube. You'll find the whole made-for-TV movie on YouTube. It hurts. The boys aren't in it. The Mad Scientist Club isn't in it. But I mean, it's only a matter of time before Netflix figures out the property that's available.
This is the story where the kids create a fake sea monster so they can build up the lake, but it goes, as every Mad Scientist Club story does, it gets a little out of control. They go a little too far, and things get a little over the top, and so yes, it becomes rough to keep the secret that they're just creating this monster to get more publicity for the town and for the townspeople, to the point where people start taking shots at the monster. They're in there pedaling and stuff, and there's bullets going past them, and then they can't keep it straight, and it's falling over, and it's a great. So
the movie is The Strange Monster of Strawberry Cove with Burgess Meredith and Agnes Moorehead from 1971. And it's on YouTube. You should watch enough to the point where you just turn it off and you'll be better off, right? The sanity, it's 2D6 sanity loss, but if you haven't checked out the books, you've got to check out the books. They're just great. If you know a 9-10-year-old boy who is looking for something, this is like you should get them Encyclopedia Brown, you should get them the Mad Scientist Club and the Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators.
The Three Investigators, Jim and I grew up with the exact same influences there, but no, I love those stories as a kid. I don't know how they'd hold up with kids nowadays. I can reread them, and I think they're great. I'd love to. I'd try to get one of my grandkids to read them, see if they hold up or not. But anyway, I wanted to wrap up T-Fest real quick. I just want to say that Gary and I are definitely going back next year. If you're in the Dallas, if you're anywhere within the 3 hour, we were like 3.5 hours away, DFW area. Quick drive down there. It's on the very north side of Pflugerville. So if you know, it goes Pflugerville, Round Rock, and Austin. You don't come anywhere near Austin, which is a good thing. You don't want to come anywhere near Austin. And so you get to the very outskirts of Pflugerville, and you're there. And it's a really quick, easy, nice drive.
That's an editorial comment right there.
Yeah. I mean, not just that. I mean, the traffic in Austin is ludicrous anyway. But just Austin, just stay away from Austin. And no, but Pflugerville is not Austin, so you're great. And a lot of these guys, Diesel was there. Jeff D and Manny were there. They all live in this area. Jenna Sester was there. By the way, I had a great conversation. We had a great conversation with Diesel. We may have I don't know if I can talk about this, Gary. We may have a really interesting thing at North Texas next year that Diesel is going to curate. I'm waiting to see if Gary tells me to shut up or not. If this is something we can talk about or not. But I don't think it's a secret. But anyway, if you like art, you might want to make it to North Texas next year. Let's just put it that way.
There you go.
Because turns out Diesel was a dumpster diver too at the last days of WotC. And so anyway, I just leave it at that until I hear something from Gary's telling me to shut up or not. But yeah, so Diesel was there, and Jim knows Diesel's great. He's great. I mean, I heard so many stories this weekend, and that's the thing about running your own convention. You don't get to talk to these guys enough. I talked to Jeff D. I did not get to talk to Jeff D at North Texas. I even sat down at his table. I said, Jeff, I want to apologize. I did not talk to you at North Texas. He said, well, we can talk now. And we did. It was great. I talked about my love of villains and vigilantes. That was my superheroes game. I didn't play Champions, didn't play Super World, but we played villains and vigilantes. So we talked villains and vigilantes for about half an hour.
Which was far superior to Champions. Thank you.
Yes, it is. It very much was. I talked to Diesel for more than I've talked to Diesel in a long time. Like I talked to Dennis for a while. I mean, it was great to talk to these guys. I had a long conversation with Greg Gillespie. We solved all the gaming world's problems Saturday afternoon.
Sure.
They're talking about what's wrong and why the OSR is superior, and so it was great. And then I met a lot of people that I didn't know, or new people, that I would just sit down and Matt was there from Long Con. He had the table next to us. It was great so Matt was here next to us, Long Con. Across from us was Gillespie. And then to the left were some people I didn't know, but they were very nice. There were some artists. They were painting figures. But I think all the vendors did really well, which is that's not always true of these smaller cons. Like I said, you get a lot of looky-loos, and that's tough. But no, we had a lot of people actually spending money, and that's the sign of a really, really good con. But I thought the venue was great. It's almost a brand new Marriott. We're definitely going to go back next year. I'm going to try to go back to EggCon also. EggCon's a little bit more of a hit in the pocketbook, but shoot, T-Fest, just a short drive down to Pflugerville, and it's just a Marriott. Marriotts aren't too expensive. It was a beautiful locale, great location, tons of places to eat. I mean, smaller cons are awesome. They really are awesome, especially when you can get down there and you can meet people and talk to a lot of people that you don't get to talk to. Like I said, during our own con, we don't get to talk to people. And I got to spend some time in the car with Gary, which was okay. It's all right.
Wow.
Gary's okay.
Wow.
I'm just trying to see if he's still here. He's not saying anything. He's not popping in. I don't know if he's paying attention.
Embarrassing.
No, but we had a great time. And next month I'll be at ReaperCon for at least one day. Gary and I are going to ReaperCon and meet up with Angela Emery and talk, because this is kind of a tradition we've had the last few years. We'll meet and have lunch with Angela Emery and talk about what she's going to paint and all this stuff. And ReaperCon is over 1,000. It's getting big now. And ReaperCon used to be a kind of a cool small con. Now it's kind of big, and it's it's all right. If you like miniatures, it's a great con, obviously. But yeah, that's until Game Hall Con in the fall, and then after Game Hall Con, we'll go to Long Con. Long Con's another nice
I think
small
you
con.
still need to start thinking about an NTRPG game day in January.
Well, that is on the schedule as far as Gary and I know. That is on the schedule. And when we know more about it, we'll let you know. But last year, we had the amazing opportunity to share the hotel with a biker gang. And I'm not exaggerating one bit. We did, and it was really pretty damn fun because the biker gang were well behaved yet boisterous, and it was quite the experience. And so hopefully we'll get lucky again this year and have a maybe not the biker. I heard the biker gang was banned after that weekend. We talked to the hotel management, and they may not be back. But no, we had a blast last year. So I wish you guys could come. Jim and Eric, you guys are invited in January. It's you fly in DFW just like North Texas. Take the shuttle over, and we'll hang out and game for 2 or 3 days. So if you guys can get the time, you guys are definitely invited.
Tempt me not.
Well, we just have to find the right weekend in January. I think that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be like the 2nd or 3rd. Gary knows more about that.
And then maybe I can make it.
Really? You're not doing anything else that 2nd or 3rd weekend?
No.
Okay.
That's pretty
awesome. That's nice to know.
The month is pretty clear for me right
now. That's nice to know. Okay. I'm going to leave that right there. Not pick it up. Well, I'm sorry. I feel like Jim and I dominated the conversation. Now, Eric, is there anything you need to add there? I feel terrible. We just yammered on.
I was keeping up with the chat. They've been pretty chatty.
So it was very chatty. But no, Kenan, I just say, Kenan, you guys put on a great show. Congratulations. I know I told you 3 to 4 times during the show that I was having a great time, but I absolutely had a great time. We're absolutely coming back. And as Gary said, we'll probably sponsor a room there because you guys just did an incredible job. And look, I'm used to first-year cons, and Jim can tell you this, and Eric, you've been around a while. First-year cons usually kind of suck, but we had Central New York Con, which Eric said was incredible, and I talked to Roger, and they made money. They did well.
And all their vendors want to come back next year.
That's the mark of a good con when your vendors want to come back.
If your vendors make a shit ton of money, they're going to want to come back to your show.
Absolutely.
Basically, yes.
And the same with T-Fest. I don't know that. I mean, we did good enough to want to come back. I'm absolutely coming back next year. So yeah, it seems like the first year cons now. These guys know. I feel like being an elder statesman of the hobby, running my
elder statesman of the hobby. Did you really say that?
Oh God.
Yes, I did. And this will be our 18th year coming up. But I feel like I have no knowledge to give these guys because our first con had 55 people. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. These guys have got it down already. These guys know exactly what they're doing. So I can't offer any advice. I'm just standing back saying, you guys, you know what you're doing. You're kicking ass. Roger, you guys are kicking ass. Ken, you guys are kicking ass. Eric and Heidi, you guys are kicking ass. I'll just attend and have a great time.
I can guarantee you when I run this episode through the AI shorts generator, it's going to find you calling yourself the elder statesman of the hobby. And that's going to be a short.
No ego and
wow.
Just all fact, no brag.
Wow.
Foofy says you're elder, so there you go.
Okay, yeah, he's half. I'm half right there now. It's. I tell you what, besides the disappearing food truck, I did have one gripe. I got a bad hamburger at the Marriott Friday night that I knew was bad because the first bite I had tasted bad. I ended up eating half it and throwing it away, and I was sick on Saturday. And I think I had food poisoning Saturday and Sunday. When I got home,
how could you have
Monday,
had food poisoning? Alex wasn't anywhere near you.
Ouch. Well, he has his minions everywhere, Jim. His minions are everywhere.
Well, it was in Wisconsin. So.
It was a late night hamburger. It tasted greasy, like they'd been using the grease had accumulated all day long. And if if a smarter man would have taken one bite and thrown it away, I'm not that smarter man.
I would have eaten the whole thing.
I thought about it, but look, thank God I only ate half of it. But Gary can tell you our wonderful, incredible barbecue at Styles Barbecue the next night. I had a pulled pork sandwich with pork rinds on it, then covered with coleslaw.
So what I'm hearing is Seth had plenty of AEDs charged and ready to go.
I had 3 bites and I was done. These guys, the guys I went to dinner with, they had racks of ribs. I mean, stacks, and they're just doing this. And then I look and their plate there's nothing, there's a couple bones. And I'm only 3 bites into my burger. I'm like, there's something wrong. This is not right. And sure enough, I didn't feel right because I got in the car with Gary. I don't think I'm going to throw up, Gary. He's like, don't throw up in my brand new Tahoe. And we're, but we got back. I was okay. I took some Prilosec and some Pepto. But yes, I made the mistake of eating too much of something I shouldn't have eaten. And look, that is an old man thing. Old men, we will buy something and go, this tastes terrible, and we're eating it. This is awful. This is the worst.
I paid for it. I got to eat it.
Yep, and we eat the whole thing. These are the worst fries I've ever had in my life as we dip them in ketchup and eat the whole, box of fries. So I'm trying to get away from that.
Same anyway, Mike. It all comes out the same.
Wow, I don't even know where.
No, had a great time. We've had a great summer. Jim is. He had a great time at Gen Con. Eric had a great time at Central New York Con, and hopefully you both had a great time in North Texas.
Texas was awesome.
This has been a great summer for cons, guys. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Egg Con was wonderful. I mean, we're living in a wonderful time because I remember the early aughts when I remember looking for cons and finding nothing and going, there aren't any cons that run old school games. There's no old school tracks. There's no cons under 500 people. These are all, there's either go big or go home. And here we are, 20 years later, and there's tons of small cons. There's tons of OSR oriented cons. There's tons of cons with old game tracks.
Mike, what are your 5 CDs of the week?
All right. We're going to go from least of to most. The Dam Builders, Ruby Red. Dam Builders, big 90s band. Their biggest album was Incendior. Their biggest hit was a song called Shrine. Look it up. They're very, very good band, very overlooked. Ryan Bingham is back. Ryan Bingham. I'm starting to like this album, Tomorrowland. I bought it a few years ago, didn't like it. The more I listen to it, the more I like it. Sometimes the more you listen to something, the more you like it. Sometimes the more you listen to it, you're like, no, that sucks. 3rd week in a row, The Wedding Present, George Best. I am starting to really, really enjoy this album. I think it's one of Wedding Present's best albums. They do noise new way. It's very noisy. It's a wall of sound. Their producer's a guy named Steve Albini. He is known for the wall of sound in his albums, and there's a lot of guitars and a lot of noise going on. All right. Big Audio Dynamite Greatest Hits. Do we remember the 80s? We do, guys. And you did not go to a nightclub and not hear a Big Audio Dynamite mix. This is the guy from Clash. After Clash broke up, formed his own band. They had some incredibly bouncy and incredibly infectious dance hits. And continuing our Elvis Costello summer.
All right.
Elvis Costello live at the Moncombo. Now, let me tell you about this. This was an album that this is a concert in 1978. This is his entire first album, and it's all live. And I bought this probably 20 years ago, had never listened to it. I finally put it in. It is incredible. It's got all his hits. It's probably, it's not like the 100th time he's ever played them. It's like the 15th time. So, or what is it now? Probably the 100,000th time he's played Pump It Up. No, this is probably the 10th time he ever played on stage. There's a lot of energy in this. I am really enjoying Elvis Costello live at the Moncombo, which
I'm waiting to pounce the week that you're gone because I have like 5 ready to go.
Oh, I know you. I should have thought it. Yeah. All right.
Well,
That's my 5 CDs.
So
and that's probably our time to. We're not going to. Well, we could top Mike's 5 CDs, but we're not going to top Mike's food poisoning story. So
No, it was not
no. Thanks to Mike, who made it on. Literally, I already had us going live. The countdown of 3, 2, and on 1, there comes Mike onto the screen. So, Mike, your timing is impeccable.
Oh, yeah, what can I say? You know, along with being an elder statesman in the hobby, I have impeccable timing.
God, I need my hip waders.
Jim, thank you as always. Folks, next live stream is tomorrow night with Don and Tom. Friday afternoon, 1 p.m. Glyn Seal, Monkey Blood. I don't know if we're going to have an evening live, but there'll certainly be a 1 p.m. live. And I'll be doing a giveaway. Glyn Seal's Reichhoft. I have an extra copy. Shipped only in the U.S. Sorry, I can't ship it to Uganda or Europe or any of those places.
Sorry,
I don't have a kidney to sacrifice.
We're sorry, you.
So other than that, folks, as always, be safe, be well. God bless. Roll those dice. Roll them well. And I'll catch many of you tomorrow.